I was happening, y'all. Your boy Rico from StreetScores. Sorry I'm coming with this video so late. Just a lot of chaos and everything. But we are here now to break down this Washington Commanders versus the Carolina Panthers in Landover, Maryland preview. Of course, I'm coming with all of the most important pivotal matchups that the Washington Commanders have to win this game. You already know I'm coming with advanced stats. You already know I'm coming with a score prediction at the end as well. And we also have a final injury report for both teams to see who's out, who's questionable, who's doubtful, who's fully good to go between both teams. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned to all of the content. Of course, I will be live streaming this upcoming game against the Panthers all 4 quarters. I'm gonna start live streaming 30 minutes before the game so we can start to preview a lot of things to see who's active, who's inactive, all of the type of stuff, and do some more preview matchup stuff and just have some general discussions, and we get hype before the game even starts. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. I'm really excited about this upcoming matchup, and I will of course do a review video, and if we win, we'll do the call-in show immediately after the game as well. But without further ado, let's go and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so first of all, the Panthers head coach Dave Canales announced that Andy Dalton will start against the Commanders like way back October 13th. Like that was back last Sunday in the press conference immediately after their game against the Falcons, their loss against the Falcons to be specific. So there was no question about whether Bryce Young was starting against us or not. Like, he is basically completely forgotten about and abandoned by this franchise, and I'm still not understanding the logic of starting Andy Dalton over Bryce Young, because Andy Dalton doesn't really have much of a future for the franchise. This is not the guy you hope is your franchise quarterback moving forward. So if Bryce Young gives you a less of a chance to win games, that's better for potentially drafting higher to get a better quarterback. Or again, Andy Dalton at his age, Bryce Young at his age, at least there's like some, okay, Bryce Young is worse than Andy Dalton today, but if he keeps playing, maybe he gets better eventually. I'm just not exactly understanding. Or at the worst case, if you want to trade Bryce Young, right now his trade stock can't get any worse than what it is from what we've seen so far. So at least if he can show you just any signs of life, any flashes throughout this season at some point, even if y'all do lose, maybe if anything you can increase his trade value just by playing him some more. I literally don't understand why Andy Dalton is starting right now. Maybe it's just a message to the team that we are still trying to win, but clearly y'all season is over. It's over with. But hey, man, not my problem. And also, shouts out to Chad Ryan for pointing out the fact that Jaden Daniels was 6 years old when Andy Dalton was a freshman at TCU. So this is just incredible age difference between two starting quarterbacks right now. Again, I feel like Andy Dalton has no business starting. He's not even a bad quarterback, but for where the Panthers is going as far as like their future trajectory, doesn't make much sense. I can see Andy Dalton stepping in for a team that's like, maybe they feel like they're an Andy Dalton away from being at least a playoff contender, but the Panthers are not, so I just don't get it. But either way, getting to the first matchup of the game right off the bat, their biggest strength for the Panthers right now, by far, is Chuba Hubbard in their run game. By far, honestly, their offensive line is the best position group of the entire team. But Chuba Hubbard is also very underrated as far as a running back goes. Like, that's really the only thing they have going for them right now. Like, if you take away injuries, they should have had a pretty decent defense, and their front seven was supposed to be really good specifically, but now most of them are hurt, which we are going to cover later on in the injury part of this video. But right now, the only real strength they have out of the entire 53-man roster is their ability to run the ball with Chuba Hubbard. Again, it's really their offensive line. They can pass block and run block pretty well, but Chuba Hubbard adds another level to their run game, especially when it comes to running to the outside, which specifically beat us often against the Ravens. We did a decent job of stopping Derrick Henry up the middle, like relatively, but when they tossed the ball to him on the outside, it got ugly for us. And I'm very sure the Panthers saw that on film and will try to take advantage of that as often as possible against us. So we will certainly need our corners on the outside to be ready to shed blocks from receivers and make tackles on the outside as well. Of course, we need the front seven, the linebackers and defensive linemen to do their job, but we also need the corners on the outside to contribute. Make sure you keep contained. Only cut inside on a block if a receiver's blocking you and you're head up against them. The only time you cut inside is when you're 100% sure that that running back is about to go inside. That's the only time. Other than that, you hold that contain as a priority above all else. And then also, A big point, shouts out to Zach Selby over there on the official Washington Commanders website. He brought up a point that we do need to keep Chuba Hubbard contained. He said the Panthers have struggled in the first season of Dave Canales' tenure. There's plenty of talent at certain positions, but it's clear that they are still trying to figure out how to play efficiently together. As a result, their offense is near the bottom of the league in several categories. Running the ball, however, is one area that they have started to grow in, mostly because of how Chuba Hubbard is playing right now behind an offensive line that is clearly the most consistent position on the team. I agree. Hubbard is third in rushing yards through 6 weeks, second to only Derrick Henry and Jordan Mason. He's also averaging 5.6 yards per carry despite ranking 10th with 86 carries. Hubbard only has 3 runs of at least 20 yards, but has been a physical force on the ground. He's 8th in the NFL with 187 yards after contact, which has helped him rank 5th in rushing yards over expected production. Hubbard in the run game should be interesting as far as a challenge for the Washington Commanders, who have had to find a replacement now for Jonathan Allen now that the defensive tackle is done for the year. The Commanders have also already struggled with Jonathan Allen to defend against ground attacks, allowing 137.7 yards per game. It's not an ideal time to lose a Pro Bowler, but it will be imperative for Washington to shut down the Panthers' run game. Doing so would make the Panthers have to rely on Andy Dalton and their receivers, and while they do have weapons, their 23rd ranking passing game doesn't create much enthusiasm for them. And on top of that, Deontay Johnson, if he even does play, which I doubt will happen actually, is very, very banged up. And then all of this means is that we need to focus on stopping the run first and foremost, and definitely focus on making them one-dimensional with a passing game that is not very potent. Like, think about it. And I really like Deontay Johnson, and he is a good wide receiver too. But he's not a true wide receiver one. Like, compare Deontay Johnson to the other best receivers on each team that we've had to face so far this season. Mike Evans, then Malik Neighbors, then Jamar Chase, then Marvin Harrison Jr., even though he's still pretty raw even compared to Malik Neighbors, and then Amari Cooper, who was open a lot against us, but Deshaun Watson is just trash. And then you have Zay Flowers, who has just suddenly ascended into what the Ravens have literally been looking for since they drafted Lamar Jackson. Again, I like Deontay Johnson, but he's not those other guys that I've just listed that are certified wide receiver one types. So honestly, secondary wise, this is our most favorable matchup for our secondary. But saying you're going to stop the Panthers run game is easier said than done, to be honest, even though their passing game isn't much to be inspired about, because to be completely honest, this running game is serious. Like, Chuba Hubbard has gained more yards than expected on 55% of his carries this season, and that's the most by any running back in the NFL with at least 50 carries this season. So we have to tackle well and be disciplined with our run fits and make sure we set and hold the edges, man. And then moving on to the next matchup, speaking of a run game, how about our run game? We need to get ours back on track. I mean, we ran for over 200 yards easily against both the Commanders and Browns each. Then we only ran for 52 against the Ravens. That's why, honestly, that Ravens game was the most encouraging game from Jaden Daniels that he's had so far in his young career to me, just because the Ravens made us one-dimensional, unlike any other game that we faced this season where we've run the ball very well against everybody else. And Jaden Daniels still looked like a seasoned veteran, well-nuanced top 5 quarterback in the NFL in that game. But we can't keep asking Jaden to do that all of the time and carry the team on his back. So let's get back to our identity. How about that? Our identity leading up to the Ravens game was being a dominant run force. That was the first time that the team has really made us one-dimensional. And having Brian Robinson back, he should be back. Not confirmed yet. We'll talk about that in the injury report part of this video. But having him back, if he does play, will be a huge help towards that. And I don't think that it's just like a coincidence that the one game that he doesn't play in, we have our worst rushing performance. Even against the Browns, he only ran 7 times, but he got 2 touchdowns out of that. He was very efficient. So, and you saw against the Ravens in the red zone, we were trying to come up with all kinds of trick plays because we didn't have a running back like Brian Robinson that could get you that 1 or 2 yards that you really needed. And then this is the right team to get back on track against as far as the run game goes, because the Panthers have given up the 3rd most yards per game on the ground and the most rushing touchdowns from any defense against the run all season out of the entire NFL, which is a match made in heaven for us because our run game leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns right now, and we also average 5.1 yards per carry. So if you had to make an argument for the biggest mismatch of this game, it's our run game versus their run defense. But We're going to talk about the passing game soon. That may actually be 1A as far as the biggest mismatches in this game. And then our run game versus their run defense may be 1B. But they're both like ridiculous mismatches that the Washington Commanders are heavily favored in. But also, shouts out to Zach Selby, going back to him. It should also be a chance for Washington's offensive line to impose this will in a weakened Panthers defensive front. The Commanders are 5th in run block win rate, 76% out of all offensive lines in the NFL, and are anchored by the interior made up by Tyler Biadasz, who is the 7th best offensive grade for a center out of all centers according to Pro Football Focus, and guard duo of Nick Allegretti and Samuel Cosmi. The Commanders' run game and its ability to control the clock is part of the reason why their offense has been so successful. If they can get back onto that against the Panthers, they should look more like the dynamic unit we've been accustomed to seeing this season. Shouts out to Zach Selby for that information. Now, moving on, speaking of our passing offense, how about that versus their passing defense? Again, like I said, I feel like this is probably the biggest mismatch of the entire game. I would say our run offense versus their run defense, maybe 1B, because that's a really big mismatch as well. But I think our passing game, man, I mean, they literally have no answer. Pro Football Focus ranks their favorite fantasy matchups going into every week, and Jaden Daniels is literally the #1 quarterback coming into this week out of all quarterbacks in the NFL, just simply because it's Jaden Daniels versus the Panthers defense. They take into account who the quarterback is and the defense they're going against. They have us ranked 1. Then they have Lamar Jackson versus the Buccaneers as 2, Jalen Hurts versus the Giants is 3, Josh Allen versus the Titans is 4, Jordan Love versus the Texans is 5, and it just keeps going down and down and down. But again, they feel like Jaden Daniels versus the Panthers has the potential to produce the most fantasy points out of any quarterback this weekend, this entire week. And if anybody is angry about the way the Ravens game went, it was Jaden Daniels. You see this picture right here with him next to LeBron James, and it's pretty much the same look, because this is the moment where Jaden Daniels started to realize, man, my defense cannot get a stop. I want so badly a chance to get this ball back and try to tie this game up, but my defense can't stop Derrick Henry, even though we know that they're running the ball, and I'm not even going to get a chance to lead a game tying, potentially game-winning drive. So he was very upset about that. And Jaden Daniels is already one of the hardest working players. I mean, even just rookie alone, arguably the hardest working rookie, but out of all players I've ever seen into the NFL, one of the hardest working guys ever. Now imagine what he's going to be like when he's angry, and then going back to home. I mean, he lost to the Baltimore Ravens. It was still in Maryland, but it was still technically an away game. Now he's coming back home. Imagine how angry he's going to be. And then poor JC Horn, we need to get him out of there. We should not let him leave the DMV. We should go ahead and make that trade before he even leaves Maryland to go back to North Carolina. But he even talked about Jaden Daniels in his press conference earlier in the week. He said, quote, "He's a hell of a player. He's real accurate, makes throws on the run. He's real fast. I think people underrate how fast he is, so he is a good player," unquote. JC Horn, you have your hands full in this upcoming matchup, man. And I also feel like even though we don't have like a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, even though Terry McLaurin is, like, when you look at certain advanced stats, he looks like a top 10 receiver in certain ways. But even if you don't consider him to be one of those guys, I feel like our system of any wide receiver can eat at any given time. It's not like we're focused on giving one guy the ball all of the time. I feel like, if anything, that makes things harder for teams like this that don't have a lot of depth, especially in their secondary, where it's like JC Horn, and especially after they released Troy Hill, it's basically just JC Horn and friends almost in the secondary. And so JC Horn is really good, and even say best case scenario, which I don't think he can. I don't think he can lock up Terry, and as much as I want to trade for him, I don't think that's a great matchup for him. But even if he does take Terry McLaurin out of the game, now you got to worry about Noah Brown. Luke McCaffrey is destined to explode in this game. I'm going to talk about that later in the video. He's one of my breakout player candidates where this is the game where he finally pops onto the scene. But you have Olamide Zaccheaus, who led us in receiving yards. I believe it was against the Cardinals, I think it was. You just have players that left and right. It's always a different guy that can contribute. Again, Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown with the deep shots against the Browns. There's always a guy you got to worry about. And if you're not 4 or 5 deep at corner, you're going to struggle against covering and stopping us. And again, speaking of Troy Hill, it doesn't help that the Panthers just cut one of their better secondary players in Troy Hill just a few days ago just to save money against the cap. And they also it was mutual, because they did him a favor by allowing him to look for a contender to land on, because he is 32, 33 years old. I already did a whole video breakdown on why we should go ahead and sign him in free agency. Again, I think we can get him for potentially really cheap. Why not? But my main point is their secondary got even worse just a few days ago from what it's been all season. And on top of all of the injuries that they already have. But on the defensive side of the ball alone, remember that we also took 2 of their defensive starters from them in free agency with the signings of Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin. So that defense honestly doesn't stand much of a chance against our offense. Like, if there were one game that I could look at on the schedule and say, yeah, we're supposed to score 50 on that team, is this one. And we had plenty of opportunities to do it against the Browns, but we just sat Jaden Daniels early in the 4th quarter. Maybe we'll explode to the point that we gain enough of a lead to where we could probably do that again this game. I mean, it would be nice to hang up 50, but the most important thing is to win and cut and walk away with everybody healthy. So that's really the ultimate goal, to basically be like the Browns game where we can just rest our starters by the early 4th quarter. And then on top of that, how about the fact that rookie left tackle Brandon Coleman is getting better and better right now and becoming a more nuanced pass blocker? Because shouts out to last of the fullbacks for pointing this out from watching the tape against the Ravens. He did a great job with some good bait technique against a Ravens edge rusher, to where he kind of like baited him by acting like he was going to engage with them. The Ravens player bit on it and tried to engage with them, and then he brought his hands back and then re-engaged with them like for the first real attempt. And then at that point, the Ravens player already had his hands down because he was like, whoa, what just happened? And that was elite nuanced technique from a 3rd round rookie that pretty much missed half the offseason. So I'm very encouraged by that. But going back to the Panthers run game, if we take that away, what will they do with Adam Thielen on IR and Deontay Johnson looking like he will more than likely not play in this game? And again, even if he does, he will not be himself at all with how banged up he is. He is really banged up. So I'm looking at St. Juice to have a bounce back game stats-wise, and I'm also looking at Mike Sanford still to keep on developing. Speaking of Mike Sanford, I don't know if y'all noticed, but there was a play against the Ravens where he had to take on their fullback who was 6'3", 300 pounds, and he did a great job of exploding onto him and basically taking him out of the play as a blocker. Shouts out to Mike Sanford still, man. He did a pretty good job of still getting engaged and being a part of the run stop that happened on that play for when Derrick Henry tried to run the ball. Good job by Mike Sanford still setting the edge there. I believe it ended up being I think Deron Payne ended up being the one that made the majority of the tackle, but Mike Sanford still was in on it. And again, there was a 6'3", 300-pound fullback running full speed at him, and he still found a way to get in on the play, and that's going to be big time. We need him in the run game. We need him against the pass. We need everything from Mike Sanford still, and the fact that he's getting better and better each week definitely encourages me to think that we have something going here, especially against the Panthers specifically. Also, moving on, Commanders defensive coordinator Joe Witt said that Frankie Louvu is getting a similar role in this defense as Michael Parsons played for Dallas. So moving forward, expect to see Frankie Louvu rush the passer a little bit more. Witt makes it clear that he's not comparing Louvu to Parsons, but he's just talking about the role of the defense, and I understand, trying to keep it political. But man, deploying Frankie Louvu as more of a pass rusher than just pure off-ball linebacker is going to be fun to watch, especially against his former team. And this makes even more sense now with Javonte Jean-Baptiste on injured reserve and Dorrance Armstrong. He's not going to play because he's banged up. He's not on the injured reserve, but he's not playing against the Panthers. And I'm not even sure if he's going to be ready to play against the Bears next week. Also, getting Jordan McGee back, our 5th round rookie linebacker, who, I mean, everybody loves right now. They have been talking about him all offseason. Even Ken Norton Jr. was so hype about him, couldn't wait to see him play. Frankie Louvu mentioned him several times during training camp, and then he went out there, and I believe he got hurt in the first preseason game, and he's been on IR basically since, and I just can't wait to get him back because he's going to take a big load off of Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner's shoulders as far as overall linebacker play, but especially when it comes to coverage. I think Jordan McGee has the ability and potential to be our best coverage linebacker, and that would be a huge help to allowing Louvu to rush the passer more and often and everything like that, and make up for the loss of our edge rusher injuries at the same time. And even on top of that, just to let you know, Cleveland Farrell had 3 pressures on just 8 of his pass rushing snaps in his return to action after missing a couple of weeks against the Ravens. So if he plays more now that he's healthier, I think that's going to be a big help for our pass rush and really our secondary, because our secondary can't cover forever, so we need elite pass rush from our defensive line. Speaking of defensive line, Deron Payne, shouts out to Jamal, my boy at Let Maul Tell It on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe to him on YouTube and everything. He does film breakdowns on all of that. Great content to follow. He brought up the point that Deron Payne has seen 74 double teams, Jonathan Allen has seen 71, and then Phildarian Mathis has seen only 21 in 6 games, and that number is likely going to grow significantly higher for Phidarian Mathis in the near future with Jonathan Allen out. You can also say the same thing for Johnny Newton. So Phidarian Mathis and Johnny Newton, prepare to see more double teams. But we did a film session on Johnny Newton just a couple of days ago for the exclusive for channel members only, and he's stepping up big time. That's another guy developing. Johnny Newton and Mike Sanverstill, you're seeing clear evidence that these guys are getting better and better every week when you watch the tape, and I'm really excited about that. Also moving on, shouts out to my boy Rio Robinson. He pointed out the fact that Jaden has been robbed of like 6 passing touchdowns this year because guys keep getting stopped at like the 1-3 yard line, and they're right there. I vividly remember Luke McCaffrey doing it against the Bengals. I remember Terry McLaurin getting shoe-tied tackled by the Browns on that 55-yard off the back foot deep bomb. Like, it's just been so many. Zach Ertz did it, I think, against the Ravens or something like that. People just keep getting stopped at the 1 yard line, and I'm just not exactly understanding why this keeps happening. Can y'all please do that boy Jaden Daniels a favor and just make sure y'all hook him up with some touchdowns, man? Please, man, if you're right there, just go ahead and give it to him. And it's still nice because more times than not, we're going to bring in the running backs. We're still going to get the touchdown anyway. But can y'all please rock with Jaden Daniels, man? Even my boy Marshall brought up a point. He showed a clip from the Ravens game, and it was like insane anticipation by Jaden Daniels on that throw to Zach Ertz where he threaded the needle with, I think, Roquan Smith in coverage. He hit Zach Ertz right there, and it's like easy touchdown. Zach Ertz, all you have to do is just fall forward. How do you fall side? You're running forward and you fall sideways instead of forward, and you're that big. It's just ridiculous. So Marshall also pointed out in that clip that Jaden continues to break his own record for players going down at the 1 yard line for his passes. If I'm Jaden Daniels, man, I would be on that. Like, bro, can y'all please just stretch the ball out or lean forward or something for me, man? I mean, our offense is still very potent, and we end up scoring the touchdowns anyway through the run game, but can y'all please help Jaden Daniels out here, man? Also, moving on, don't forget that we do have home field advantage in this game. Like, well, first of all, let's just talk about the fact that we have home field advantage this season. That's not something typical of us. And the crowd actually does affect games. Against the Ravens, you saw it. Even though, like, the crowd was like 70-30 because it was in Maryland, there were still times where Jaden Daniels was trying to communicate with the offense, and he just couldn't because the crowd was yelling so loud. I remember vividly one play, he was trying to call an audible, and the guys just literally could not hear him. He was trying his best to tell everybody what to do. People still look confused. We had to call a timeout because of that. Can we please do that against the Panthers as well? That's going to be huge for causing the Panthers, especially on offense, to stay off schedule. We need the home crowd loud when the Panthers are on offense. Don't even let them communicate just like the Ravens didn't let us. And it helps that the Panthers are already a mistake-ridden, self-inflicted offense that gets a lot of penalties already. Like, even when they are home, they get a lot of penalties. Even when they do have the home crowd, they still make a lot of mistakes. And then on top of that, they're also tied for 4th in offensive turnovers out of the entire NFL. So as long as we do what we're supposed to do on defense and the crowd is loud, they will shoot themselves in the foot. Like, they literally are the type of offense where they could put together a double-digit play drive for like 60 yards and then throw an interception in the red zone. They're just liable to do that. While the Ravens, they don't really do that. Outside of that play, like where Mark Andrews dropped an easy pass from Lamar Jackson and then Mike Sanverstill did a good job of making sure he made the play and caught that interception, the Ravens usually finish those drives. Whereas the Panthers seem like even when their offense is on fire, they are bound to mess up and they don't typically finish drives. So let's force a lot of field goals. Or how about don't you even just let them cross half field and let our offense just go ahead and blow them out so we can go ahead and rest our starters by like the early 4th quarter again, like we did against the Browns. Also, like I mentioned earlier briefly, is this the Luke McCaffrey breakout game finally? Because he's been open a lot, but Jaden Daniels just has not necessarily seen him very often yet. I think if Jaden Daniels starts to look at Luke McCaffrey a little bit more, he's going to start the ball out. Because Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown are getting the majority of the attention from the defense and getting the attention from their best corners. Like, I don't really ever see J.C. Horn following Luke McCaffrey in this game. He's going to be on Terry a lot of the time, maybe even Noah Brown some, maybe even Olamide. But I don't really see him covering, like, Luke McCaffrey. So it's up to you to go out there and ball out. I mean, they just released their starting slot corner, who's actually pretty good. So that's a big loss for them. I'm expecting this matchup for Luke McCaffrey to finally have his breakout game. Because, first of all, not only is he top 8 in separation score out of all receivers in the NFL before that Ravens game, but also he literally catches everything thrown his way. This man has 11 catches on 11 targets right now. And Cliff Kingsbury even talked about rookie wide receiver Luke McCaffrey in his press conference earlier this week. He said, quote, his work ethic and his fearlessness is through the roof. Every day at practice, you almost have to slow him down because how much he wants it and how bad he wants it and things like that. Unquote. And I'm super excited, man. I think this is the perfect time for Luke McCaffrey to break onto the scene. Now moving on to an injury update. If you look on the screen right now, man, pray for them Panthers, dog. On our end, we already know Dorrance Armstrong and Tyler Owens are out. That's pretty much expected. They tried to let Tyler Owens go on Thursday. He was limited, but then I guess it wasn't working out too well. So he's still dealing with that shin injury for the past few weeks. He didn't participate in practice on Friday. Dorrance Armstrong already knew he wasn't going to play against the Panthers. I mean, I'm not even sure if he'll play against the Bears. So that's just somebody we need to watch. Cleveland Farrell is questionable, but I'm sure he'll play. Brian Robinson, we'll talk about him soon because we have some exact quotes from Dan Quinn himself as far as that goes. And Jordan McGee is also questionable. He's been a full participant in practice for the past 3 weeks. I think he's finally good to go. And everybody else is good to go. So we should be like fairly injury free outside of Jonathan Allen and Javonte Jean-Baptiste going in the IR. We are a very healthy team versus the Panthers. Them boys need help, man. Running back Jonathan Brooks out. Linebacker Claudin out. Linebacker Josie Jewell out. Tackle Taylor Moton out. Linebacker John Radigan out. Defensive end Ashawn Robinson out. Jadeveon Clowney doubtful. Defensive tackle Jaden Crumity doubtful. Sam Franklin doubtful. And even like Dan Jackson, cornerback, questionable. Even Deontay Johnson, at first it said doubtful just a couple of days ago. I mean, or yesterday at some point. I vividly remember seeing the injury report said doubtful, but then they upgraded it to questionable. So maybe he looks a little bit better than they expected. But either way, this guy is very banged up. Didn't participate in practice until Friday. And then that one day he was still limited. And then you have David Moore, you have Josh Neiman and LeBrian Ray, Tommy Trimble, even their tight end, who I wanted out of the draft. All questionable, man. These guys are banged up. I mean, I honestly feel really sorry for them because it doesn't just end here. How about when you take a look at the IR? Because don't forget that, like, when you're looking at injury reports, it doesn't include IR guys like 9 times out of 10. So don't forget Raekwon Williams, the defensive end, injured reserve back in May. Popo Amavwe back at defensive tackle back in July, injured reserve. How about cornerback Anthony Brown back in August, injured reserve? How about Derek Brown, arguably the best player on the entire team? They're all pro defensive tackle, injured reserve back in early September. Adam Thielen went to injured reserve back in late September, along with Jordan Fuller, their safety, injured reserve as well. How about Shaq Thompson, one of their better defensive players, better players of the entire team, starting linebacker, injured reserve early August. I mean, godly, how about their center, Austin Corbett, injured reserve August 15th. Like, this team is so banged up. I mean, somebody please help this team, man. They are struggling, man. And shouts out to Air Raid Concepts for bringing up this good point. Clowney, Jewell, and Ashawn Robinson all out or doubtful. And remember, their best defensive tackle, not included in that list of guys that I just gave you, their guy Derek Brown, all starting defensive linemen for them. And then Shaq Thompson, the linebacker. I mean, golly. But to Air Raid Concepts' point, he says all of these guys are either out or doubtful for the Panthers versus the Commanders. I like the under in this game because Washington's going to do whatever they want on the ground. We could just run the ball endlessly. Jaden Daniels may not even have to throw the ball in this game. Also, just to remind you that Dorrance Armstrong with a rib injury is out, but Dan Quinn said in his press conference just yesterday, quote, he had a good week, but he's not there yet, unquote. So maybe we should be a little bit more optimistic about his chances playing against the Bears than I originally thought. Then Dan Quinn also talked about Brian Robinson. He said, quote, he's trending in the right direction, but no decision has been made on his status as of Sunday, but still very encouraging to hear that he's trending in the right direction. He's quite likely to play against the Panthers, but this is the type of situation where, like, if we get a certain amount of lead, again, this is a guy that, like, you don't even wait till early fourth quarter to sit him. Maybe you sit him sooner than that, because he didn't play in the entire second half against the Browns. We didn't need him. He scored 2 touchdowns on 7 carries, and it was kind of like this game is starting to become a blowout, so we won't even need you in the second half, even though the score was only like 17-3 or 17-7, something like that going into halftime. We didn't have that much of a lead, but they could just already tell from the way that the game was going, we won't need you in the second half. We'll maybe bring you out if we absolutely need you, but we won't. Also, Dan Quinn talked about the fact that Johnny Newton and Sheldon Day will definitely play a lot, and we'll need more out of them on Sunday. But he also mentioned that defensive end Jalen Holmes, who we just signed off the streets, had stood out in his first days of practice here, so maybe that's a guy that we should be excited about going to the Panthers. If you're seeing a random guy in a number that you didn't expect balling out, it may be Jalen Holmes, so be on the lookout for him. Now, of course, also, right now, of course, everybody's picking us to win. Like NFL Network, every single person is picking us to win, and every win prediction is by a minimum of at least 9 points. People don't see this being close at all, which of course always makes me nervous. I hate that. I always prefer to be the underdog, but it is what it is. Also, I want to let y'all know that the Washington Commanders will be introducing the Darrell Green suite at Northwest Stadium. He is getting honored at this Panthers game. He's being enshrined and all of that type of stuff. And if you haven't seen the suite, please go to the official Washington Commanders Twitter account. They posted it 5:37 p.m. October 16th. It is well worth the 2 minutes and 11 seconds of your time. He literally has an entire suite in the stadium that's dedicated to him. Like, it's a million times better than the way that they honored Sean Taylor. Remember, they did say that they were taking down the Sean Taylor monument situation that they had, and they will revamp it to make it better as well. But the Darrell Green one is insane. And so I'm really excited about what the Sean Taylor one is going to look like. Also, this weekend, Mayor Muriel Bowser said that they are honoring football legend Darrell Green by giving him a key to the city as well. So Darrell Green is having the time of his life, and he deserves every little bit of this. So shouts out to him. Remember, we retired his jersey last season. Now we're going to do this whole honoring with them, and I'm just so excited, man. I can't wait to watch that. I'm just as excited about seeing that as I am as the game itself. And my fault too. That was not last year. I think that was this offseason where they went ahead and decided to do that, because I remember Adam Peters and Josh Harris and everybody was already there. Also, shouts out to my boy Disco. This is the last thing I'm gonna leave you with. The #1 album when Darrell Green was drafted was Thriller, and then when the #1 album when Darrell Green retired was The Blueprint 2 by Jay-Z. Lord have mercy, man. That man's career is insane. I mean, that just, when you put it like that, that sounds wild that he stayed in the NFL that long. Remember, I know that clip has been going around lately again, where he was like 40 years old and he still ran a 4.2 something and was the fastest player on our team at the time. That is insane, man. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I really hope the Commanders make Darrell Green proud. I'm really excited about that. I got to get to this Georgia game because right now it's less than 5 minutes left in the second quarter. You can tell how busy I was today by the fact that I'm not watching Georgia up 17-0 against Texas right now to get this video done. That's how busy I was earlier, but I promise I will get y'all this video before the day was done. So I really appreciate all of y'all that pulled up, that made it this far in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you like what you heard, if you learned anything new, if you just appreciate the content. Please leave a like on the way out, and of course let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything. And of course, my score prediction here, I'm not gonna lie, man, I'm feeling 34-10. I'm feeling real confident. I'm feeling 34-10 right now, and then we'll probably just go ahead and sit our starters early in the game. That's what I'm feeling. Let me know what your score predictions are right now. I really appreciate y'all. Again, make sure you please leave a like on the way out. Let me know in the comment section your favorite matchups in this game, any information that I left out that you feel like is important and a part of this this big game that's coming up. Let me know how you feel about everything. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.